The courtroom had never been this quiet. Not even during the closing arguments of high-profile federal trials or the bombshell testimony of an undercover agent. This silence felt heavier, like the air itself had stopped breathing. You could hear the ticking of the old brass clock above the judge's bench and the occasional creak of the century-old floorboards under shifting weight. Even the fluorescent lights buzzed more softly, as if they too were listening. All eyes were on her. Emily Carter sat on the witness stand, legs dangling off the edge, her shoes not quite touching the floor. 8 years old, pale skin, strawberry blonde hair pinned behind her ears, but already slipping loose. She wore a yellow dress, not the flashy floral kind, but soft cotton, faded from too many washes, the kind a little girl might wear to Sunday school, or to feel brave. But it wasn't Sunday, and she wasn't here for a blessing. Her arms clutched a tattered rabbit plush that had lost one eye and most of its stuffing. She hadn't said a word since entering the courtroom. To the left of the bench sat her mother, Rebecca Carter, spine rigid, knuckles white around a crumpled tissue. Her navy blouse was freshly pressed, but worry had wrinkled her brow beyond what any iron could fix. Her lips moved in silent prayer, or maybe rehearsal of what she'd say if the judge asked. Either way, her eyes never left Emily. Across the aisle sat Daniel Carter, Emily's father. He hadn't always looked like a man on the edge. Photos from 3 years ago showed a former Marine with a confident smile, square jaw, and steady shoulders. But today, Daniel sat hunched over, trembling slightly, as if every movement required permission. He hadn't shaved. His lawyer whispered something into his ear, but he didn't respond. His eyes were locked on Emily, unreadable. She never looked back. Her gaze was fixed on something else. A golden retriever sat calmly near the edge of the courtroom, just outside the wooden barrier. His fur shimmered like honey under the light. His name was Charlie, and embroidered in bold white letters on his red vest were the words, "Service dog, do not pet." But more importantly, Certified PTSD Response Unit, Section B32. Charlie wasn't just any dog. He was trained in a specialized military-grade behavioral lab, once part of a Department of Defense trial initiative for war veterans. But when the RPM funding for non-human trauma responders was rerouted, Charlie was reassigned, first to prisons, then juvenile facilities, and finally to private psychological clinics. That's where he met Emily. Judge Miriam Shaw, a seasoned woman in her early 60s with snow-white hair pulled into a severe bun, adjusted her glasses and scanned the room. Her reputation preceded her. By the book, no nonsense, but respected even by her harshest critics. She tapped a pen against her notepad, then looked directly at the child on the stand. "Miss Carter," she said, voice gentler than expected. "You don't have to answer out loud if you're not ready. You can nod, shake your head, or however you feel safe." Emily blinked. Once, then nothing. Her fingers tightened around the plush rabbit. Her eyes drifted to Charlie. For a moment, her entire body stilled. Then, without speaking, she lifted her right pinky and drew a tiny circle in the air. Barely visible, but Charlie saw. His ears twitched. Then he stood. No one stopped him. Not the bailiff, not the judge, not even Daniel, who now sat bolt upright, hands twitching at the edge of his chair. Charlie trotted to the witness stand. He didn't jump or bark. He turned to face the courtroom and sat, calm, still, eyes sharp. Emily tapped her chest, twice. Charlie barked. Once. The sound echoed like a gunshot. Gasps scattered across the room. A pen fell from someone's hand in the back. The court stenographer paused typing, fingers frozen mid-air. The judge leaned forward, lips slightly parted. What does that mean?" she asked. A woman rose from the back pew, Dr. Rachel Green, child psychologist and trauma specialist. She moved with urgency, but not panic. That's the sequence, she explained, voice calm but thick with meaning. It's what we call a T-46 response, under trauma protocol from the Carter Act reforms. Emily and Charlie have been practicing it for 7 months. It means... She glanced at the judge, then back at Emily. She's ready to speak, and she needs to show you something. Judge Shaw nodded slowly. Proceed. Dr. Green walked up to the bench and pulled a small, unmarked envelope from her bag. Emily gave me this yesterday. She said if Charlie barked, I was to hand it to you. Judge Shaw accepted it with trembling hands. She opened the envelope. Inside was a hand-drawn picture, crayon. A child's work, but unmistakably vivid. In the drawing, a little girl, Emily, was crouched in the corner of a room. Her arms shielded her head. A large figure loomed over her. Angry red lines framed his face. In the corner, a golden dog barked furiously. The judge turned the page over. On the back, in clumsy block letters, "He says he loves me, but I'm only safe when he's not near." A ripple of emotion passed through the courtroom like a wave hitting shore. Rebecca Carter gasped, hands flying to her mouth. Daniel stood abruptly. "This is insane," he barked. "That's a dog! She's making this up!" Judge Shaw slammed her gavel down. "Mr. Carter, sit down. One more outburst and I will hold you in contempt." He froze. Charlie didn't move. Emily didn't blink. And then she spoke. "I remember," she said, voice thin and raspy. "But sometimes Charlie remembers more." Judge Shaw stared at her. Her hand hovered over the gavel. Silence again, a heavy one, until a child's voice cracked it open. "He kept yelling," Emily said. "I tried to scream. I couldn't. But Charlie barked. Every time he barked, someone would stop, even Dad." Daniel opened his mouth but said nothing. "Charlie remembers who hurt me," Emily added. "Even if I forget." For a second, no one breathed. Then Judge Shaw leaned back. "I've seen a lot of cases in 30 years, she said, "but none where a dog delivered the testimony." She turned toward the mother. "Mrs. Carter, based on the evidence presented, the emotional state of the child, and the verified trauma protocol from B32 Certified Animal Response Units, I hereby grant you full custody, effective immediately." Rebecca burst into tears. Daniel lunged forward, but the bailiff stepped in, a silent shadow with a hand on his holster, not drawn, but ready. As the tension broke and murmurs filled the courtroom, Emily remained seated. Charlie sat beside her. Still, loyal. The gavel hadn't fallen yet. Judge Shaw paused. She stared at the little girl, then at the golden retriever beside her. "You've said more with one signal than most adults manage in 1,000 words," she whispered. Then she lowered the gavel, not in judgment, but in awe. If you've ever had to find courage when no one believed you, or trusted a being who couldn't speak but always understood, maybe you know what Emily felt that day. If that's you, or someone you know, drop a number 1 in the comments below. You're not alone. But even that wasn't the end. Because when Emily stepped down from the stand, she didn't walk to her mother. She walked to Charlie, knelt down, and whispered into his ear. Whatever she said, the dog wagged his tail and smiled. And Daniel Carter. He didn't blink. He didn't speak. But behind him, a federal officer checked a tablet, flagged an alert from a facial recognition system recently installed in the juvenile court's waiting area. Daniel had been seen 48 hours earlier entering a restricted military installation in North Carolina, unauthorized. And that, the officer thought grimly, might just fall under Federal Statute 46A, attempted witness coercion via unauthorized entry into sensitive government facilities. The story wasn't over. It was only beginning. It wasn't the bark that changed everything. It was what came after. The bark was just the start. A short, crisp sound from Charlie's throat that echoed off the wooden walls like a warning shot. But what it cracked open was a truth buried under 2 years of silence. Judge Miriam Shaw lowered her glasses slowly, eyes locked on the golden retriever still sitting beside the witness stand. His eyes weren't like any dogs she'd seen in court before. There was intelligence there, alertness, something almost unnervingly aware. He didn't pant. He didn't wag. He simply waited, like a soldier awaiting orders. "Is this part of the signal?" the judge asked, still stunned. Dr. Rachel Green nodded, rising from the second row with practiced calm. "Yes, Your Honor. That's confirmation. The second tap was Emily's trigger for validation. The bark confirms readiness to proceed." Judge Shaw turned to Emily, who now sat straighter than before, like some invisible burden had shifted. The room held still. The bailiff stood motionless. Even Daniel Carter, who only moments before had exploded with accusations, now sat white-knuckled, chewing on the inside of his cheek like a man trying to bite back ghosts. Rebecca Carter couldn't stop trembling. The judge gestured to Dr. Green. "Proceed with what she intended to show us." "Doctor." Green stepped forward, her fingers gently pulling an envelope from her coat pocket. "Yesterday, during our last session, Emily gave this to me. She said, and I quote, 'If Charlie barks, this means the judge is ready.'" The envelope was handed across the bench. Judge Shaw opened it carefully, like she was unsealing something sacred. What she found inside wasn't a statement. It wasn't legal paperwork or evidence admissible under normal court standards. It was a child's drawing, a room, crayons, colors, agitated, almost angry, especially the red. In the corner, a little girl huddled on the floor with her hands over her head. A large man towered above her, his mouth a jagged black line drawn in with near-violent pressure. And beside them, Charlie, barking. Judge Shaw flipped it over. Written in uneven block letters were the words, "He says he loves me, but I'm only safe when he's not near." The judge went silent. Her throat tightened. Behind her, a security officer discreetly stepped forward, trained to read body language for escalation under Directive 13, Section 2A, Behavioral Threat Response in Family Courtrooms. But the threat wasn't in the room anymore. It was in the picture, and in the past. When Judge Shaw looked up, Emily was still watching Charlie, but her eyes now shimmered, not with fear, but with readiness. Daniel Carter stood abruptly. "She's 8. That dog is trained. Who says she didn't make all this up in therapy?" "Mr. Carter," the judge warned. "She's using that mutt to rewrite history. What kind of circus is this? Are we even allowed to take this as fact?" Dr. Green's voice cut through the room like a blade. "This isn't circus, sir. It's science. Charlie is part of the B-32 Emotional Detection Unit, originally developed for war veterans experiencing memory suppression and dissociative disorders. He's trained to recognize physiological trauma responses. This signal system is a validated communication framework, authorized under the revised Trauma Disclosure Protocol 6.1. The judge's gavel slammed down once. Hard. "Enough," she said. "Mr. Carter, another outburst, and I'll have you escorted from the premises under Judicial Protection Clause 4B. Daniel sat down, face red and twitching. Emily hadn't blinked once. The court reporter resumed typing, slower this time, as if afraid to miss even one breath of what came next. Judge Shaw leaned forward. "Miss Carter, can I ask you a question?" Emily's eyes finally met the judge's. "You don't have to answer aloud," she added. "But if you can, if you're ready, we're listening." There was a pause so long it stretched time. Then Emily whispered, "He says I lie, but Charlie never forgets." A sharp intake of breath rippled through the room. Rebecca stifled a sob, squeezing her eyes shut. Dr. Green stepped closer to explain. "That's part of the trauma loop. She associates safety not with parental care, but with reactive memory through Charlie. He's more than a service dog. He's a living anchor to her suppressed timeline." Are we saying a dog's memory holds legal weight? The defense attorney scoffed. Your Honor, Dr. Green replied calmly, there are precedents under Section 12. 3 of the Child Protection Expansion Bill where physiological data from service animals, heartbeat increases, triggered postures, audio cues have been submitted as secondary confirmation in trauma testimony. Charlie, as if on cue, turned his head slightly toward Daniel. A low growl rumbled in his chest, soft, controlled, but unmistakable. Enough, Judge Shaw whispered again, but this time it wasn't for the room. It was for herself. The weight of it, the emotion. The ache of a child whose voice had been stolen and replaced by barks and pictures. She closed the drawing slowly, placing it inside a protective sleeve. Dr. Green, she said, voice thick, has this sequence been validated in a therapeutic environment? Yes. I logged each stage on the TDRS, trauma-driven response simulator we used in sessions. Her signals were consistent over 40 individual trials. So she knew what this bark meant? She did. She invented it. The judge blinked. She did. She created the sequence. We built around it. For a long moment, the judge said nothing. Then she turned to Emily. You made a language no one else could hear. Until now. Emily said nothing, but she reached down and touched Charlie's back, resting her fingers just behind his collar. Charlie leaned into the touch. Judge Shaw cleared her throat. Let the record show that I believe the child. It wasn't a final judgment. Not yet. But it was something. Daniel opened his mouth again. No words came. Rebecca exhaled for what felt like the first time in days. Charlie simply blinked. And then... The reporter in the back of the room, who had been quietly scribbling in her notebook, rose to ask for permission to speak. Judge Shaw looked over her glasses. This is irregular, but go ahead. My name is Sarah Quinn, from the Richmond Herald. I've been covering trauma policy changes and witness testimony protocols under the new RPM Federal Compliance Act. With your permission, I'd like to request public access to this session's transcript. This is unprecedented. The judge looked at Emily, then at Charlie, then back at the reporter. Make it known this court authorizes publication, but redact the child's name. Let the world hear her voice through what matters. Sarah nodded. Yes, Your Honor. Rebecca turned toward Dr. Green. Will she always need Charlie to speak? The doctor smiled. Maybe not forever, but right now, he's her bridge. And sometimes the safest bridges aren't the ones we build with concrete. They're the ones that bark. If you've ever felt voiceless or know someone who speaks through silence, drop a number 2 in the comments below. Let them know they're not alone. Later that evening, after court adjourned, Emily sat alone in the hallway, her feet swinging from the bench as the courthouse lights buzzed faintly overhead. Charlie sat beside her, as always. Dr. Green approached slowly. You did something amazing today, she said gently. Emily didn't respond. I have something to show you, the doctor added. From her bag, she pulled out a tablet. On it, a short video played, Charlie and Emily, during their training. The room was sterile, lined with monitors, inside Lab Room 3C at B32 Trauma Research Center. The footage showed Charlie reacting to a scream, Emily's drawing breath, frozen in place, then Charlie, barking once, sitting, then nudging her hand. You didn't know it then, Dr. Green whispered, but that was the first time you spoke. Emily stared at the screen, her lips parted slightly, then she whispered, He knew before I did. Charlie tilted his head, as if understanding. Dr. Green knelt down. Do you want to know a secret? Sometimes dogs like Charlie remember better than we do, not just because of training, but because they never stop loving. Emily looked at her. Is that why he barked today? Dr. Green smiled. That's why you did. A small noise behind them made them all turn. Daniel Carter, flanked by 2 federal officers, was being escorted down the hallway. He wasn't cuffed, yet, but his face was pale. One officer glanced toward Dr. Green. "Ma'am, we reviewed the camera footage from Facility 19B. Mr. Carter accessed restricted biometric systems without clearance. Appears he tried to override a trauma-linked custody flag tied to his daughter." Dr. Green's face hardened. "That's a felony under Section 46A, witness interference via military subsystem access." The officer nodded grimly. "We're moving him to holding. Judge's orders." Emily didn't speak, but Charlie barked, just once. "What do you think should happen to Daniel Carter now? Was justice served, or is there more to uncover? Type 3 below if you think Emily's story is just beginning." The moment the courtroom doors reopened that morning, there was a subtle shift in the air, something colder, tauter. Gone was the uncertain hush of the day before. In its place stood tension, brittle as glass. Daniel Carter was back, but this time, he wasn't just the defendant in a custody hearing. He was a man under quiet federal observation. 2 plainclothes agents from the Department of Civilian Security Oversight, DCSO, were stationed discreetly at the rear, communicating in clipped phrases over encrypted earpieces. Their eyes never left him. Yet Daniel's expression had changed. Gone was the trembling shell. Now he walked into the room like a man bracing for battle, jacket buttoned, jaw set. His lawyer, a sharp-tongued litigator named Alex Reeves, trailed him like a shadow, already flipping through a thick binder of documents. On the other side of the courtroom, Rebecca Carter held Emily close in the waiting area. The little girl's hand rested gently on Charlie's neck, her fingers absently stroking his soft fur. Judge Miriam Shaw took her seat and glanced at the docket. Her face was unreadable, but the edges of her voice had sharpened. "We will now resume proceedings in the matter of Carter v. Carter, case ID 27F493, she announced. "Let the record reflect the presence of both legal counsel, the minor child, and certified support animal under Article 19C. There was a beat. Then Daniel stood up. "Your Honor, before we proceed," he began, "my counsel and I request to present new material evidence that casts doubt on the credibility of the child's testimony and the dog's behavior sequence." Judge Shaw's eyes narrowed. "Proceed carefully, Mr. Carter." Daniel's lawyer stepped forward. "We have acquired video footage and documentation indicating that the dog, Charlie, is not only trained to respond to signals, but may have been specifically conditioned to react against the respondent through a technique known as targeted aversion imprinting, often used in military working dog training programs under the now discontinued Project Sentry." The courtroom gasped. Dr. Rachel Green stood immediately. That program was decommissioned a decade ago due to ethical concerns and has no application in therapy-certified animals. Reeves held up a page. "This is from a declassified manual obtained via the Freedom of Information Act, where behavioral triggers, such as scent association and visual profiling, were used to make dogs react aggressively to particular individuals. My client believes this therapy dog was, consciously or unconsciously, turned against him." Daniel rose. "She trained him to hate me." Emily flinched. Charlie didn't move, but his body stiffened, eyes narrowing toward Daniel. Judge Shaw stared at Reeves. "Are you accusing a child of psychological manipulation via a therapy animal?" "I'm accusing the system of creating a bias so deep it's indistinguishable from programming," Reeves replied. "And we have more." He turned to the screen behind him, where a grainy video began playing. It showed Emily and Charlie inside Lab Room 3C of the B-32 trauma facility, surrounded by padded walls and biofeedback monitors. At one point in the footage, Charlie barked at a staff member entering the room, tall, male, ex-military posture. The implication was obvious. "You're suggesting that the dog learned to respond negatively to men of a certain profile?" Judge Shaw asked tightly. Reeves nodded. "Specifically, men matching my client's physical type, which would explain the courtroom behavior." Dr. Green stepped forward again, voice calm but firm. With respect, that clip is taken out of context. The man entering the room was wearing a shirt that smelled of acetone, a known olfactory trigger for Charlie due to a prior incident with cleaning chemicals. The facility's logs confirm that. Judge Shaw held up her hand. I want everything verified. Pull the chemical logs. Confirm the footage with timestamp cross-references. Until then, your theory remains speculative. But the room had already turned. Rebecca wrapped her arms around Emily tighter. Daniel saw it and smiled, just a little. Then he turned toward his daughter. You remember when we used to go to the lake, Em? He said, voice suddenly softer. Remember how Charlie was just a puppy then? You said he looked like a golden cloud. Emily didn't respond. But now? Daniel continued, voice twisting. Now he growls at me like I'm a stranger. Is that what they taught you? That I'm the enemy? Objection, Dr. Green snapped. Emotional coercion. Sustained, Judge Shaw said sharply. Mr. Carter, direct any statements through counsel. But it was too late. The courtroom had gone quiet again. Not from awe this time, but confusion. Doubt. Sarah Quinn, the reporter from the Richmond Herald, tapped nervously at her laptop. Her editor had already greenlit a front-page spread. But if this turned into a scandal over therapy animal abuse, the narrative would change overnight. Still, something felt wrong. The way Daniel's tone shifted, the way he tried to control the mood in the room. It wasn't just desperation. It was calculation. Then came the break. An officer stepped in, Agent Monroe from the Cyber Forensics Division of Federal Justice. He approached the bench with urgency, slipping a folder to the judge. Her eyebrows rose. Let it be known, she said slowly, that we have just received access to Mr. Carter's encrypted communication logs, obtained through a warrant under Statute 46A, digital tampering in custodial proceedings. Daniel paled. Your Honor, that data is inadmissible, Reeves protested. Not under the Digital Endangerment Clause. Your client bypassed security protocols using an ex-military encryption key linked to the biometric systems at Facility 19B. We have surveillance confirming his unauthorized access, and message logs requesting alteration of behavioral incident records relating to Charlie. A wave of gasps swept the courtroom again. Dr. Green looked at Daniel, not with triumph, but sorrow. I trusted you'd let her heal, she whispered. Emily, sensing the shift, reached for Charlie. He pressed against her gently. But Daniel wasn't done. None of that proves abuse, he shouted, unraveling again. That dog only responds to her because she's broken. You've all turned her into a weapon. She's not broken, Rebecca said, standing now, voice steady. She survived. And then Emily stood too. For the first time, she walked to the center of the courtroom, Charlie by her side. No signal, no command, just presence. She turned to her father, her voice a whisper but sharp as glass. You always said I was too quiet, that I needed to grow up. But I remembered, Daddy. The word fell heavy. I remembered how you screamed, how the walls shook, how the doors slammed, and how Charlie came and lay next to me until the world stopped spinning. Her voice didn't tremble. He remembers when I went quiet, because he was there when you didn't stop. Daniel tried to speak. Couldn't. Judge Shaw stared at the man who once had legal authority over the child, now holding the room together with her breath. She picked up her gavel, but paused. Instead, she turned to the bailiff. Place Mr. Carter under federal hold pending investigation for violation of Statute 46A and obstruction of evidence via encrypted tampering. Rebecca covered her mouth. Dr. Green exhaled shakily. Daniel's chair scraped loudly against the floor as the officers approached. Emily, he said, voice cracking now. Emily, I'm still your... But Charlie barked, twice, and Emily turned away. Have you ever witnessed someone try to rewrite history to hide the truth? If this part hit you hard, type 3 below. You never know who might feel heard when you do. Outside the courtroom, storm clouds gathered. Rain tapped gently on the courthouse windows as agents led Daniel away. Sarah Quinn stood by the stone steps, her hands trembling as she called her editor. "I think the story just changed again," she said. "This isn't just a courtroom miracle. This is the start of something bigger." Inside, Judge Shaw remained seated, staring at the girl who had just confronted a monster without raising her voice. She turned to the stenographer. "Suspend proceedings until further notice. And forward today's transcript to the Office of Federal Witness Reform." She looked once more at Emily. "You didn't just speak," she whispered to herself. "You undid silence." The gavel hovered in midair, but it didn't fall. Judge Miriam Shaw's hand trembled slightly, unseen beneath her polished bench. The courtroom waited, breath caught between one world and the next. Emily Carter, just 8 years old, stood beside her golden retriever, unmoving. Charlie's eyes didn't blink. He was focused on the judge now, not Daniel, not the gallery, just her. And Miriam Shaw, a woman known for iron rulings and logic sharper than any blade, hesitated. Because something had shifted. It wasn't the law that wavered. It was the weight of it. She set the gavel down slowly. No sound. No closure. Not yet. "We're not done," she said softly, almost to herself. "Not until I understand all of it." Outside, thunder rolled. Storm clouds pressed heavy against the courthouse dome, casting long shadows across the wooden floor. Inside, the silence thickened. "Clear the room," she instructed the bailiff. "All parties except counsel, Dr. Green, and Emily." Even the stenographer hesitated. The judge gave her a firm nod. "You too, Ms. Daniels. I'll dictate a supplemental note afterward." Within minutes, the courtroom emptied. Only 6 remained: the judge, Emily, Rebecca, Charlie, Dr. Green, and Sarah Quinn, the reporter who now stood quietly by the gallery, pen down, recorder still. "You stay," Judge Shaw said to Sarah, "but not as press. Today, you're a witness." Sarah blinked. "Yes, Your Honor." Judge Shaw leaned forward. "Dr. Green, you said Charlie was trained through B-32, correct?" "Yes," Rachel Green answered. "He was part of a discontinued military-grade trauma response program, then reassigned for pediatric therapeutic use. And his behavior? Still aligned with Directive 9.2, trauma anchoring via animal companionship. His reactions are instinctual, yes, but patterned and deeply conditioned. Emily's bond with him formed through our replicated memory recall immersion protocol." The judge narrowed her eyes. "Why didn't you mention that sooner?" "I wanted the courtroom to hear Emily, not just our data." "You withheld material?" "I chose humanity over statistics. I understand that's not procedure." Judge Shaw tapped her pen, then looked at Emily. "Come closer, child." Emily obeyed. Charlie followed, tail low but alert. Judge Shaw came down from the bench, a rare move for someone of her stature. She sat beside Emily on the bench, equal ground, eye level. "I've ruled on hundreds of abuse cases," the judge said, "and I've seen so many children who couldn't speak. Some never do. But you did. In a language you built yourself." Emily didn't speak. She didn't have to. The judge turned to Rachel. "Do you believe this child has more to say?" "I believe she already has," Rachel replied. "But there's one thing we haven't shown you." She pulled a tablet from her bag, entered a code, and handed it to the judge. It played footage from B-32 Room Delta. Emily, maybe 6 months ago, crying, curled up against a wall, Charlie beside her. No sound except soft static from the heart monitor synced to his vest. Suddenly a screen displayed flashing colors. Red, orange, yellow, used to trigger specific memory zones in the brain. Emily stiffened. Charlie stood up and began pacing. On screen, the trauma indicator spiked. She wasn't just remembering, Rachel said. She was reliving, and he was logging it. His vest recorded biometric spikes. Her vitals, her distress, it's all on record. We matched the time-stamped neural triggers to descriptions of previous abuse incidents. Sarah stepped closer, stunned. You're saying the dog recorded her fear? Every time, Rachel nodded. And every time, he remembered, even when she couldn't. Judge Shaw put the tablet down. She looked at Emily. You've already shown me the truth. Emily slowly reached out and touched the judge's hand, then whispered, I don't want to go back to forgetting. The judge's throat caught. She turned to Rebecca, whose hands were shaking. You'll need protection, she said, the kind that goes beyond this courtroom. I'll do whatever it takes, Rebecca said. Sarah interjected. I know a federal advocacy group, Guardians of Silence. They specialize in witness rehabilitation cases under post-custodial psychological restoration acts. I'll make the call, Judge Shaw said. We'll bring them in. She stood, gathered herself, then nodded to the bailiff to reopen the doors. The courtroom refilled. Tension snapped back like a bowstring. Daniel wasn't there. Not anymore. But the system he represented, the fear, the silence, it still was. Judge Shaw addressed the room. Today, we witness something that's not just precedent, it's paradigm. She looked toward the federal representatives now seated at the back. I recommend immediate adoption of Charlie's protocol into all trauma testimony evaluations involving minors. We will call it the Carter Signal Standard. A murmur passed through the gallery. Sarah typed like a storm. Rebecca wept again, but softer this time, relief instead of pain. Charlie sat proudly beside Emily, tail thumping once. The judge continued. I also authorize retroactive review of past custody cases dismissed due to nonverbal testimony gaps. Any minor who exhibited trauma-compatible behavior but lacked verbal defense is eligible under this. One of the federal agents nodded, already texting someone. Effective today, the judge said finally. Emily Carter is placed under protected custody of Rebecca Carter. Case sealed. And Charlie, she smiled, Charlie may be just a dog, but in this courtroom, he was justice in fur. Has an animal ever saved your life, emotionally or otherwise? If you believe they understand more than we know, leave a number 4 in the comments. Let's make their voices heard, too. The sun came out hours later, long after the courthouse emptied. Sarah Quinn remained behind, sitting on the front steps, staring at the half-written headline on her laptop. Dog saves child in courtroom shocker felt too shallow. When a bark becomes a verdict was closer. She deleted it. Instead, she wrote, The day the gavel waited for a whisper. Inside, Emily stood in the hallway, her fingers intertwined with Charlie's leash. They didn't need words anymore, just presence and trust. That was when the judge appeared beside them. There's a foundation being built in your name, she said softly. Emily blinked. It's called Signal 46, a program for children like you, who were once silenced but chose to signal instead. Rebecca choked back a sob. Charlie nudged Emily's leg. The girl smiled for the first time in hours, but just as they turned to leave, a court officer rushed down the hallway. Your Honor, he whispered, there's something you need to see. He handed her a tablet. On it, video from a parking structure outside the courthouse. A car, tinted windows. Surveillance footage showed a man inside, Daniel Carter, hours after he was supposedly taken to federal holding. He wasn't in custody. He was watching, waiting, and holding something. Not a phone, a small black case, military issue. What do you think Daniel was planning? Should someone like him ever walk free again? It started with the sound of tires. Soft, controlled, deliberate. A black SUV, military-grade suspension, rolled into the underground garage beneath the courthouse, right beneath the very floor where Emily had just been declared free. The vehicle's plates were shielded by a reflective glaze, illegal, but not uncommon for someone with Daniel Carter's connections. He hadn't disappeared. He'd gone dark. In the passenger seat sat a narrow black case, flat and matte. A Vigil X-class field transmitter, stripped of serial numbers. Military equipment, restricted for civilian use since the Security Enforcement Act of 2021. Capable of jamming GPS, intercepting Bluetooth signals, and, if tuned right, spoofing neural link commands from registered service animals, like Charlie. Daniel opened the case. Inside, switches, ports, and a small vial of liquid that shimmered an unnatural violet. The label had long since worn off, but in faint letters one could still make out Batch 7CB, Lab 9, B32 experimental compound, neurodisruptive. He stared at it. Then at the screen on the transmitter. It was cycling through familiar frequencies. Searching for one it knew, one it had been close to. Charlie's signal. Upstairs, the court building began to empty. Judge Shaw had just exited through the private stairwell. Rebecca was signing paperwork with Child Services. Emily waited near the rotunda, sitting quietly beneath the stained glass seal of justice. Charlie was beside her, still, but his ear twitched. A low hum vibrated in his collar, inaudible to human ears. Emily noticed. "Charlie?" she whispered, gently touching the collar. "You okay?" He stood uncharacteristically fast. His breathing changed. Dr. Green approached. "Is he responding to something?" I think so," Emily said. The psychologist narrowed her eyes. "His vest's biometric sensors are fluctuating. Heart rate just spiked." She tapped into the VRMS app on her tablet, Veterinary Regulated Monitoring System, standard issue for all B32 therapy units. "Wait," she muttered. "He's receiving a signal, but it's not from the court database." The screen flashed. Unauthorized signal, frequency conflict detected. Her stomach dropped. "Emily," she said gently, "stay right here." Downstairs, security was scrambling. The surveillance operator had flagged the vehicle too late. By the time they sent a pair of uniformed deputies to check, the SUV was empty. The signal was still broadcasting. The vial was gone. And somewhere inside the building, so was Daniel. Rebecca heard the first alert through her phone, a text from Sarah Quinn, who had eyes on the garage feed. "He's inside." The next 10 minutes moved like broken glass, sharp and unpredictable. Dr. Green ran to Judge Shaw's office. Charlie began pacing again, like he had in B32 room Delta. "Something's wrong," Emily said. "He's looking for it." The judge burst back in, slamming her office door open. "We've got a breach. The father's not in federal holding." Charlie barked, twice, loud, sharp, echoing. Then he looked directly at the hallway leading to the elevator shaft. He ran. Emily chased after him. "Emily!" Rebecca screamed, but the child didn't stop. 2 floors down, the elevator doors opened. Daniel stepped out wearing a courthouse maintenance jacket. No one looked twice until he pulled out a small injector pen from his pocket. He was calm. Too calm. Years in the Marines had taught him how to suppress fear. But this wasn't war anymore. This was personal. The plan was simple. Inject Charlie with the neurodisruptive serum, intercept Emily, and reset the story. Claim that he'd come to protect her from the false memories induced by the therapy. With Charlie compromised, there would be no further testimony, no dog to refute his words. But something went wrong. He didn't account for the bond. When Charlie rounded the corner and saw him, the bark that escaped his mouth was unlike anything the building had heard before. It was primal. It was protective. It was war. Charlie lunged. Daniel dropped the vial. It shattered. Purple liquid spread across the tile like spilled oil. The hallway exploded in chaos. Charlie pushed Daniel into the wall with his full weight. Daniel fell, but managed to jab the injector into the dog's side before being tackled by security. Charlie yelped. Emily screamed. Rebecca arrived seconds later, pulling her daughter back. Charlie staggered. His legs trembled, then collapsed. "No!" Emily cried, trying to break free from her mother's grip. "Doctor." Green slid beside the dog, tearing off the vest to access the trauma monitor. "He's going into neuroshock, chemical interference. We need an antidote." "Do you have one?" the judge asked, breathless. "Yes," Green said, trembling. "But it's locked in the containment cabinet at Lab 3C, the original B-32 base, and it's 2 hours away." "I'll call a chopper," Judge Shaw snapped. "We'll invoke Judicial Emergency Code 12B. "Too late," Green whispered. "He doesn't have ours." Emily knelt beside Charlie, stroking his fur. "You're not leaving," she whispered. "Not you." But that's when it happened. Charlie lifted his head. Despite the chemicals now surging through his bloodstream, he raised his gaze to meet Emily's. She tapped her chest twice. No bark came, but Charlie moved. He nudged her hand with his nose. The sequence was incomplete, but the signal was unmistakable. He remembered. And in that moment, something extraordinary happened. The trauma monitor spiked, not in pain, but in cognition. "Wait," Green whispered, eyes on the screen. "He's overriding it." "What?" "His bond with her. It's real-time recalibrating his neural pathways. He's not just a support dog. He's adapting. It's rewriting the injection protocol." I mean Charlie's fighting it. Not instinct, not training. Choice." Rebecca wept. Emily smiled through tears. And Charlie barked. Once. The hallway went silent. Judge Shaw stared. "Did he just—" "Yes," Green breathed. He finished the sequence. The guard turned to Daniel, now cuffed and bleeding. "Do you know what you've done?" Daniel didn't answer. His eyes were locked on Emily. And what he saw there wasn't fear. It was finality. If you've ever had someone try to erase your truth but you fought to remember, leave a number 5 below. You're not alone, and you never were. Later that night, in a trauma center 20 miles away, Charlie slept beside Emily's bed. The antidote arrived by helicopter just in time to flush out the remaining serum. Vets called it a miracle, but Emily knew better. It wasn't a miracle. It was the last signal, the final message from a protector who wouldn't let go, even as his body broke. Dr. Green filed the report under RPM tag 46A, Assault via Neural Technology. Sarah Quinn's article the next day went viral. Headline: "When the hero wore a vest, not a badge." But even that couldn't capture what happened, because some things can't be printed. They have to be felt. But this isn't where the story ends, because tomorrow morning, Emily would be testifying again, not just in custody court, but in a closed Senate hearing. Her case had been flagged under the Federal Signal Witness Initiative, and lawmakers wanted to hear about what really happened inside Lab B-32, and what they were still hiding. Behind locked doors, behind silence, behind the science that made Charlie possible and almost destroyed him. They called it a hearing, but it felt like a reckoning. Emily Carter sat at the center of a long mahogany table in Washington, D.C., her small legs barely brushing the floor. Behind her, a wall of blue flags. In front of her, a semicircle of sharply dressed senators, policy advisors, and federal health officials. The Capitol's air was colder than she expected, not just because of the temperature-controlled room, but the tension. The kind of chill that comes from old secrets standing too long in the dark. Charlie lay curled at her feet, breathing slowly, vest newly reissued with a sleek navy overlay, RPM Registered Witness Response Unit, House Class, Tier A. They said this was about child protection protocols, but really, it was about Charlie, and the program that made him. "Miss Carter," began Senator Andrews, a silver-haired man known for his hard stance on defense transparency, Can you tell us, in your own words, what happened the night your dog was injected? Emily looked up. Her eyes didn't shake. He tried to erase him. Who did? My dad, she answered. But not just him. The people who gave him the tools. The room fell still. Judge Miriam Shaw was in the back row, watching silently. Dr. Green sat beside Emily, notebook closed, hands folded. Sarah Quinn live-tweeted from her reserved seat, fingers already trending "Choik the Bridge" on social media. Emily reached into her small backpack and pulled out the broken collar Charlie had worn during the incident. The signal plate was scorched from interference. This, she said, was how he knew me. A senator leaned in. You're referring to the neural link encoder embedded during B-32's post-trauma sync protocol? Emily nodded. They said it was to help him understand me. But they also built a way to make him forget. Senator Kim, from the Ethics Subcommittee, frowned. Are you suggesting the technology was dual use, both therapeutic and suppressive? Dr. Green stepped in. Not suggesting. Confirming. Internal documents from Facility Lab B32, secured under the Protection of Biometric Sentience Act, prove that the trauma sync interface was originally designed for field memory override in combat dogs. When the program was repurposed for children, no one stripped the overwrite layer. Gasps spread. Charlie stirred. The defense contractor representatives, seated stone-faced in the second row, whispered urgently to each other. Emily stood. She walked to the center podium, unplugged the mic, and knelt beside Charlie. Then she tapped her chest. Twice. Charlie barked. Once. It was the same signal that had turned a courtroom upside down. Now it was echoing across federal halls. He remembers everything, she said softly, even the people who wanted him to forget. The hearing chamber burst into noise, camera shutters, murmurs, legal aides scrambling. But Senator Andrews raised his hand. We've heard enough. Later that night, under a quiet Virginia sky, Emily sat on a swing outside her new foster home. Not a temporary placement this time, a permanent one. Rebecca's custody had been formalized by an emergency panel under Witness Advocacy Directive 14C, and the family would relocate under new federal protection terms. Charlie rested at her side, no leash needed. I don't think I want to forget, she said quietly. Rebecca looked up from the porch. Forget what, sweetheart? Any of it, Emily replied. Even the scary parts. If I forget the pain, I might forget how strong I had to be. Rebecca didn't answer. She just walked over and wrapped her arms around her daughter. Charlie barked, and for the first time since that hearing, Emily laughed. But in a government sub-level 40 miles east, Facility B32 hadn't closed. It had rebranded. Codename, Aegis Mirror. The lab director stood over a console, watching as new prototypes, Gen 9 trauma dogs, underwent training. Unlike Charlie, these ones didn't have collars. The sync interface was implanted. This one's showing higher resistance to emotional override, a tech said. The director nodded. Push the dosage. Sir, per regulation, I said push it. The screen glitched. Then, static. For a brief second, a new name flashed across the file. Subject ID, E. Carter, flagged non-compliant. And then it vanished. But one person had seen it. Sarah Quinn. She was watching remotely through a whistleblower link provided by a disgruntled B-32 researcher. Her article was already halfway written. The program never ended inside Aegis Mirror. Meanwhile, Charlie received his certification upgrade from RPM Tier A to Omega Class, a classification never before given to a non-human. Dr. Green reviewed his vitals. He shouldn't have survived that injection, let alone adapt to override it. He didn't just survive, Rebecca said. He evolved. Charlie barked softly. Green added, We always called them service animals, but we never asked who they were serving. Emily turned. He served the truth. Have you ever fought for something that couldn't speak for itself? If you believe voices come in all forms, leave a number 6 in the comments. This story may be ending, but some bridges stay built forever. Months later, a statue was unveiled in front of the new National Center for Child Witness Protection. Bronze, life-size, a little girl with a hand on a golden retriever's head. Inscribed beneath, "Sometimes the strongest bridges don't have beams or bolts. They have fur and loyalty and memory." A boy passing by with his father asked, "Who was that dog?" His dad smiled. That was Charlie, the one who remembered. And from the crowd, Emily, now older, stronger, bolder, watched. She tapped her chest. Twice. Charlie barked once, and the world listened. Some stories don't end with a gavel. They don't close with a verdict, a headline, or even a tearful reunion. Some stories linger because they remind us of the things we try hardest to forget: fear, silence, betrayal, and the long road back to truth. Emily's journey wasn't just about a custody battle. It wasn't even just about abuse. It was about voice, the kind of voice that doesn't need words to shake the world. In a world flooded with noise, we forget to listen. We forget that silence can scream, that a child's drawing can expose more than 1,000 pages of testimony, that a single bark from a therapy dog, wired not for war but for healing, can bring down lies constructed by adults with power, authority, and access to classified tech. And above all, we forget that bridges are not always built from stone or steel. Sometimes they come with fur and golden eyes. And they wait patiently beside us until we find the courage to cross. What Charlie and Emily gave us is more than just a courtroom drama. It's a mirror. One that reflects how easily truth can be buried under institutions, technology, and even good intentions. Because what does it say about our world when a dog has to speak for a child? What does it say about our systems of justice, our families, our policies, when emotional intelligence must be coded into AI or animal neurolinks because we've forgotten how to listen to pain that doesn't come packaged in perfect grammar? In a time when AI algorithms filter what we hear and bioengineered responses dictate what we feel, stories like Emily's cut through the static. They remind us that authentic connection is still our most powerful tool, more powerful than military-grade signal disruptors, more real than courtroom procedure, and far more lasting than any data point or headline. Yes, this story was about a little girl and her dog, but it was also about bioethics, about the morality of control and the invisible war between those who manufacture silence and those who dare to break it. Charlie was never just a dog. He was a living contradiction, trained by the military, but saved by love, wired for command, but loyal to freedom. An artifact of science, yet an agent of something deeper, something profoundly human. His final signal wasn't just a bark. It was a declaration, a stand against forgetting, a protest against programming, a reminder that memory isn't just data, it's identity. And Emily? She didn't just survive, she rebuilt. She rewired the story around her, not through rage, not through revenge, but through remembrance and resilience. Her testimony not only changed her own life, but rewrote protocols. Her voice, amplified by a creature that couldn't speak, forced the law to evolve and exposed how easily trauma gets buried when it doesn't fit neat legal boxes. It's no coincidence that Facility B32, a place meant to heal, was quietly experimenting with neural override compounds, or that her father, once a product of the same military system, used that very technology to try to silence her one last time. There's a larger question that echoes through this story. What happens when systems built to protect also hold the power to suppress? The ethics of AI, of biometric surveillance, of therapy turned weapon, all converge in this one child's experience. And it forces us to ask not just what is possible, but what is right. In a society where data can be faked, memories edited, and testimonies digitally enhanced, the unspoken may be the last pure thing we have. So when Emily tapped her chest twice and Charlie barked once, we didn't just witness a legal statement, we witnessed a language born from trauma turned into truth. And that changes everything. If you've ever felt unheard, if you've ever needed someone to remember when you couldn't, if you believe that not all bridges are built with words, then this story was for you. And maybe, just maybe, you know someone who needs it too. Because while the headlines will fade, and even Charlie may one day sleep his last under a peaceful sky, the signal remains. It lives in every child learning to trust again, every therapist who listens without pushing, every judge who pauses before dropping the gavel, and yes, every golden retriever who remembers when the world forgets. If you believe voices come in many forms, some barked, some drawn, some silent, then leave a number 5 below and share this story so more people know what really matters. Do you think animals should be allowed to testify if their memory is more loyal than ours? Let us know in the comments. Your thoughts might be the next bridge someone needs to cross. And if this moved you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more true stories that challenge systems, stir souls, and speak for the silent.